Hi, you guys. Welcome back. This is going to be part two. I do have a limit on how much video I can record, so we're going to be recording this in pieces. So bear with me, but all that matters is that you guys are getting the information. Okay, so last time we left, we went ahead and we talked about species 1 and how that is in a J-shaped portion. And since that is J-shaped, we said that that was exponential growth. So anything that is exponential growth is J-shaped. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to number 9. Number 9 is in that same graph. So looking at number 9, there are a couple of things that they're asking us. So they're going ahead and saying, out of the 4 species, which one was the first to reach its carrying capacity? So we have to see which one leveled out first. So we have to go ahead and we have to look at the graph and see in the time and days, right, where did it go ahead and where did it level out? So if I go ahead and if I look at species 2, I see that it doesn't level out until about 80 days, right? So species 2 is about 80. If I go to species 3, I see that it kind of levels out at about the same time as species 2, so it's about 80. If I go to species 4, though, I go ahead and I see that, okay, at about like 20, you kind of starts to see it level off. And then even as it goes into that, right, you see that it does level off pretty early, right? So since it does level off pretty early, you can say definitely it levels off by 40 days. That in out of the 4 species, right, species 4, right, reaches carrying capacity first because it levels off early. So this one reaches carrying capacity at about 40 days. So that is your answer for number 9. Okay, so now it says in 10, it says circle or highlight the organisms in the food web that store the most energy. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over both cellular respiration and photosynthesis, you guys should have a better idea of how to answer these now that we kind of like, you guys have like a bigger picture of it basically. Excuse me. So, we have to go ahead and we have to see who would store the most energy. And basically what it comes down to is that if you are a producer, you have the most energy in the environment. So no matter what, right, a producer will always have the most energy, right? So the thing to make sure that you guys make note of is that producers have the most energy, right? So in this case, right, we have to go ahead and we have to find where our producers are. And what are producers, right? So producers are things that are autotrophs. So that's another way that you guys might see it is autotrophs. And autotrophs mean that you guys are able to go ahead and to make your own food. And if you make your own food, you are likely a plant, right? More than likely, right? Not always. There are like aquatic ones that like algae and all of that, and those are not necessarily plants, right? Or there's some bacteria that make their own food, but that's besides the point, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this, right? And in a food web, right, since these plants are able to go ahead and to hold everything in the environment, we're going to go ahead and we're going to circle our trees, our grasses, and these are the things that store the most energy. Okay, so going ahead and moving on, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at a trophic pyramid. So same deal, right? Kind of looking at some of these same things. So looking at this, right, in the trophic pyramid to the right, identify which organism could be classified as a producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Okay. So, like I said earlier, right, producers, they make their own food. So this would be anything that can make their own food. So this would be like your grass, right? A primary consumer, right, eats producers. Okay, so a primary consumer eats producers. So this could be either a herbivore or an omnivore, right? So these are herbivores usually. Oopsies. So that's herbivores, right? Secondary consumers eat primary consumers. So they eat primary consumers. consumers. So they're usually carnivores. So those are what those guys are. Tertiary consumers eat secondary consumers. And these guys are usually your top carnivores. So usually these guys are top of the food chain sort of deal. So those are what those guys each are. Okay. Some things to keep in mind, right? How I know that they're primary, secondary, or tertiary is how far away they are from the producer. So if you are 1 step away from the producer, you are a primary consumer. If you are 2 steps away from the producer, you're second to the grass. And then if you are 3 steps away from the grass, then you are a tertiary consumer. Right? So going ahead and drawing a few arrows on here just to make sure that we are all kept on track. Producers are the grass, so this will be A, right? Your primary consumers is B, your herbivores, right? Your carnivores, which will be C right here, and your D would be this guy, right? So it'll be grass, mouse, carnivore, that looks like a snake. I think it's a snake. I hope it's a snake. And then that one right there is a hawk. Okay, so it says, why is a pyramid used to display the transfer of energy between organisms? So in other words, why do we have this weird triangle shape, and what does this triangle shape mean? Okay, so there are a couple of things that you guys do need to know. If you guys remember, when we go ahead and we talk about each of these, there is a rule of how much energy gets transferred up, right? And we have the rule of 10%. So 10% from the grass goes up to the mouse, 10% of that mouse goes up to the snake, and 10% of the snake goes up to the hawk, right? So this is the rule of 10. So rule of 10, which means 10% of energy is transferred. Okay, and since we have 10% of that energy that is transferred up, right, the amount of energy goes down as you guys go up the pyramid, right? So the reason why it goes ahead and it has that pyramid shape is because the amount of energy available decreases. Of energy available decreases, right? So since the amount of available energy decreases, right, because of that rule of 10, we do get a pyramid shape as we go ahead and as we go up. Okay, so here it says, describe 2 advantages that zebras have by living in a large group as pictured to the right. Okay, so there are advantages and disadvantages of living in groups, right? And some people find it advantageous, right? Some creatures do very, very well going ahead and living in groups, and some creatures do very well living alone. And it just kind of really depends on the whole nature of it and how this works, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with groups, and then we'll go ahead and we'll also touch on individuals. Okay, so if we live in groups, number 1, you have protection, right? So there's protection from predators and all of that. So that is one advantage of going ahead, and probably the number 1 advantage of going ahead and living in groups, right? There's also the fact that when you live in a large group, you're able to go ahead and help take care of young, right? So if you're taking care of younger animals, taking care of young animals, that is also an advantage of living in groups. So that would probably be like the top 2 advantages of going ahead and living in those groups, is that you guys do get protection, and there is the fact that